Welcome to a special edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Thanks as always for being with us. And there again will be no phone calls today as we continue our look ahead to the Giants' regular season schedule. Today we preview the Panthers. They'll play the Giants in Week 10. That's on November 10th in Munich, Germany. And to do so, we bring in Panthers beat reporter Schuyler Callihan of SI Now. Schuyler, great to see you. I hope you got your passport ready because we got to go overseas for this ball game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I was looking forward to this one, but unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but my wife's due date is exactly November 10th, so I won't be making the trip over. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting matchup, though.
Well, congrats and all the best of luck with your expanded family for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the Panthers come off of a 2-15 season, which means there's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed. Dave Canales comes over. We know what he did in Tampa Bay with Baker. We know what he did with Geno Smith in Seattle. What's the biggest thing he can do besides fix the offensive line to help Bryce Young become a better quarterback?
Really just instill confidence in him, because I think that's one of the biggest things that he didn't have last year. Was he was trying to figure things out as the season was going along. You had different people getting into his ear about what he needed to do, and I think it kind of presented a murky picture for him. And you kind of saw that as the season unfolded, that it just wasn't clicking for him. And this is a guy that's had very strong past of being able to click early, whether it's at the high school level or at the college level, and it just wasn't working for him last year. I think that's the big thing with Dave Canales is not just quarterbacks, but you look at anybody on that offense, he will take you where you are and go from there and build out a plan. He doesn't believe that, well, if you haven't met expectations to this point, then we've got to play catch up. He's going to take you where you are and help you take that next step so you can get back on course.
How much has Andy Dalton around help Bryce Young, or is that not much of an aid for him? Is Dalton the kind of big brother guy who's able to guide him at all?
Yeah, you probably don't hear about it as much as maybe some of the other veteran, kind of young QB relationships. But yeah, Andy's in there constantly feeding him advice, giving him tips out on the field. You can see that they have a strong relationship on and off the field. They actually just recorded a podcast not long ago, them playing Madden 25 or 24, whatever it was. So it's pretty cool to see kind of the age difference there and kind of how they go about things. But yeah, I mean, going back to, the very first day of practice this year, Brad Idzik, the offensive coordinator, said, all right, we're going to get everybody and go back to the basics, including Andy Dalton. He's like, I'm going to teach Andy Dalton how to take a snap under center, even though he's been doing this for several years. So,
Okay.
yeah, they've done a tremendous job getting along together. And Andy, since last year, has kind of taken this role and kind of ran with it. He knows that at this point in his career, this is kind of what he is. He's going to serve as that mentor that he can pass all that knowledge on to. And he's been just impressed from the very beginning with Bryce and his intelligence.
All right, so let's assume that Bryce Young does get better in the 2024 season. What are some of the high points from last year that you saw that give you the belief that he will be able to excel at a higher level?
Well, I think, if you're trying to find a game, it's kind of hard, right? I mean, there wasn't too many games where he kind of lit up the stat sheet or had an impressive throw, but I think the Green Bay game was probably the best version that you could see. The Christmas Eve game, they were back and forth. It was 33-30. He just looked probably the most comfortable of his rookie year, and he made some big time throws. He hung in the pocket. And I would say probably the biggest trait from that rookie year that I took away is just his toughness. I mean, the kid just got beat up play after play. He was getting pressured constantly. He didn't have very much time to throw the ball, but he just kept getting back up. And that was my biggest concern heading into last year's draft was, can this kid take a beating week after week, knowing that he's got that thin frame? And I think he proved that he can do that.
I know about quarterbacks taking a beating, Schuyler, and that's no pun intended, trust me. I saw the number. It turned out to be 65 sacks. That's obviously way too many. I was a big Ike Ekwonu fan when he came out in the draft. I thought he was going to be a super stud, obviously a great guard, but I thought he was going to be a really terrific tackle too. I know he has not performed up to expectation. I see they went out and they got Hunt and Lewis to be the guards. I saw Austin Corbett apparently is going to move to center from
Yep.
guard. And I guess, Moton is probably the most accomplished of the potential starting five linemen. So as you look at them weaving these five together in September, what are your expectations?
It's going to be a much improved group, and it's hard to see. It's kind of rare to see an offensive line go from one of the worst groups in the NFL to maybe a top 15 or so unit. And I really think that's possible with this group. I mean, Austin Corbett hasn't played center in a long, long time, but he's repped there every single year as a backup, and he's kind of been their emergency center over the last couple of years. You talked about Lewis and Hunt; those two are very, very talented, and I think are going to really shore up that interior. But I really think this is kind of like you said with Icky. This is kind of the year where he's got to show that he's that guy and he can be that franchise left tackle. And I think he can. You go back to his rookie year with Matt Rule, Joe Brady. It was kind of a weird system where they were trying to go spread offense. That's not what is catered for him. When they fired Matt Rule, they transitioned into this ground and pound downhill offense. Icky just got on a roll, and he looked like the franchise left tackle that they drafted him to be. And last year, they go away from that with Frank Reich. They go back to that spread offense, and it put him on an island too much. He didn't have much help with that constant rotating door at left guard, and it kind of exposed him a little bit. So I think this offense with Dave Canales, it's going to be all about getting the ball out quick, and you got Deontay Johnson the outside now that can help accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be the biggest part of this: getting the ball out quick, realizing we can't hold up for 4 or 5 seconds, and ask guys to be on an island. I think this offense is going to work out great for Icky. Dave Canales feels the same way.
Yeah, Iquanu was always a mauler when he came out
Yeah.
of school, and so I really thought that he would be able to bring that to the NFL. It's good to know that the system may fit him better. All right, let's talk about the targets now. For some reason, Adam Thielen does not get old. I know I don't know how he's defying the nature's rules of Father Time. I mean, 100 plus catches last year for 1,000 yards. Schuyler, I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone saw that coming. I think everyone was just hoping he would kind of be a solid number 2 or number 3 guy. Maybe DJ Chark or Jonathan Mingo or Terrace Marshall would take a step. But yeah, Adam Thielen was the number 1 guy last year. Now, this year, I don't expect him to have the 1,000-yard season. I don't expect him to have 100 catches or anything like that. But when you have Deontay Johnson and you have Xavier Legette and you have Jonathan Mingo maybe takes that step, this is a much deeper wide receiving group than it was a year ago. And I think that's going to help Adam Thielen be more efficient, even though his numbers may come down a little bit. He's going to be more efficient because there's going to be more open parts of the field.
You mentioned Johnson. They get him in that trade from Pittsburgh, but I thought one of the other interesting additions for the Panthers when they drafted Jatavion Sanders in the
Yeah.
4th round, I'm intrigued by him. I don't know if he's going to make an immediate impact, but I think he's got some set of tools.
Yeah, he's going to be a guy. I think that his role is going to grow as the season goes. And when we saw him here in OTAs and mini camp, he just looks like a football player. Like he's just one of those guys that it might take a little bit of time for him to become a complete player at his position. He's got to learn how to be more of a blocker, but he's too good of an athlete to not have on the field. So you're going to see him out there. They may go with some 12 personnel sets and get him on the field. They may even put him in at the slot just to get him out there because he's that good of a receiving threat and that somebody that Bryce Young can attack the seam with. So, yeah, I think he's a complete player in terms of the receiving aspect of it. In my opinion, he's probably the best receiving target at the tight end position as of today on the roster. So, yeah, he's going to be an interesting piece to this.
All right, so that brings us to one of the headline players of this draft, Jonathan Brooks, coming off that ACL. They take him in the 2nd round. If he had been healthy throughout his college career and not been injured, he would have been the first running back taken. I don't think there's any question about that. But he does drop because of the injury. What is his progress and what can they expect from him once the season starts?
Yeah, everything's going well. As far as I know, it seems like he's taken everything in stride. It looks like he's trending to be available for training camp. He might miss the very beginning of it. They're going to kind of ease him into it as they should. I don't know what his workload is going to look like, and I think this is kind of a year. It's almost going to be like a redshirt year for him because he needs to kind of understand what's going to be asked of him. He's going to be learning the offense. And while he did that in the spring, it's a whole different ball game when you get out there and you're out on the field. So I think it's going to be a slow integration for him. And the good thing is he doesn't have to be forced out there because you have
Right.
Chuba Hubbard, you have Miles Sanders, Rashad Penny, Raheem Blackshear. They've got a ton of horses in the stable. So it's a good situation for him. But I would say if you look towards November, December, that would be kind of the ballpark of where I'd say this might be where he starts to take off and maybe take some of those carries away from Chuba and Miles.
I'm glad you brought up Sanders and Hubbard and Penny. These guys are vets. They've been around the
Yeah.
block a number of times. They know the score, they know what they have to do. But until Brooks becomes a factor, and as you said, maybe it won't be until the second half of the season, will they go running back by committee? Or will somebody, according to what they want to plan it out to look like, seize the lead role? I mean, I remember what Miles Sanders
Yeah.
did for Philadelphia. He could
Yeah.
play.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like last year, everyone's knocking Miles, and yes, he some of that was his fault as well. But look at the offensive line he was running behind last year. I mean, it was a mess. You compare that to the wall that he had in Philadelphia, and it's night and day. Any running back would see that big of a dip in production. So yeah, I think when it comes to the division of labor, like I really do feel like it's going to be a running back by committee. Everyone keeps saying it's going to be Chuba Hubbard's going to be the lead back, and that might be the case going into it because he finished the year as the starter. But when you're paying Miles Sanders what he's getting paid, I mean, this is the guy that landed the most lucrative contract of any free agent running back a year ago.
Right.
I don't think they're going to move off of him this offseason. So you're going to want to get him those reps and give him a chance in this new offense, which I think, again, caters to him a little bit better. He can get the ball in the passing game as well. Maybe an area that he has a little bit more experience with over Chuba Hubbard. He's a better pass protector than Chuba. There's things there that I think Miles can get back on track and be the lead back until Jonathan Brooks takes over.
All right, before we go to defense, Giants fans reminding you that the Giants Huddle podcast features long-form interviews with Big Blue and league personnel. It's on your favorite podcast platforms, as well as giants.com/podcast. Season tickets are available for the 2024 season. Go to giants.com/tickets. And the official connected TV streaming app is Giants TV. It's free on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. We continue our conversation with Schuyler, flipping it to the defensive side of the ball. Well, let's see. You got a couple of familiar names over there now. Jadeveon Clowney. You got A'Shawn Robinson, who played with the Giants last year. These two guys obviously are brought in now to try to supplement that defensive line.
Yeah, they've been searching really since they selected Derek Brown in 2020 to find somebody to pair him with. Shy Tuttle did a decent job last year. He's still going to be a part of this thing, but they never really had that other big guy, that big body that could really take on double teams and kind of draw attention away from DB. So when you have a guy like that that has the experience, that has the production lined up behind it, this is going to be a monster year for Derek Brown. And that's saying something coming off the year he just had, recording the most tackles ever for a defensive tackle in the NFL. So this is quite the tree that they've formed up there with Tuttle, Robinson, and Brown. And I think really the biggest question for them right there is the depth. I don't like the second string all that much. I think they could maybe attack the waiver wire when it comes around to late in the preseason, but they've got to establish that depth in that front seven.
Interesting in that the Giants-Panthers game will feature probably the two best defensive tackles in football, in
Yeah.
Brown and Dexter Lawrence. And that's going to be a real fun matchup, even though they don't play against each other per se. That's going to be a very interesting storyline during the course of that week. Okay, pass rush wise, DJ Wanham comes over from the Minnesota Vikings after having a pretty good year getting to the quarterback. How important is his addition?
It's massive if he can get healthy. He's still working back from that injury that he had at the end of last season. He didn't participate in spring ball, and it's probably looking like he's going to miss a little bit of start of training camp. So
Wow.
that's a little bit of a red flag. But they do have, like you said, they brought in Jadeveon Clowney. They have Kayvon Chason, who they brought in as a role guy. DJ Johnson, they hope they can take a second step. And what I like about this is I think that they almost kind of recreated Brian Burns in the aggregate. It's like a Moneyball situation, right? You lose Brian Burns, you don't want to pay him $30-some million. So you go out and try to recreate his production. They did that with bringing in Wanham, bringing in Clowney, bringing in Chason, and now you got three guys as opposed to one, and you're paying a heck of pretty much about the similar price for the same type of production.
We will talk about Brian Burns at the end of our segment because I don't want to confuse the Panthers scouting report with the now Giant star pass rusher. So let's go right to the Carolina secondary. And I had to look this up, Schuyler, I confess. I know that J.C. Horn's had a bunch of injuries, but I couldn't remember exactly which ones they were. So I did the research. Foot, ribs, ankle, hamstring. Am I missing anything else? When is this guy going to actually be able to reach his potential?
That's a great question. I mean, it's really been just a bad string of luck. Like you go back to his rookie year, the Thursday night game against Houston, it was a non-contact injury that lost him for the season. He was backpedaling and all of a sudden he just fell. And it was kind of like those oh no moments where you know it was going to be something bad. And it's just been one thing after another for him. But he's taken a different approach to this offseason. He's done more weightlifting instead of kind of the conditioning, agility stuff. So he thinks that's going to be something that can help his durability in the long run. We'll see. But I mean, when he's out there, he's one of the best young cornerbacks in the game. I mean, the tape speaks for itself.
Sure, sure. Woods, Fuller, I guess Jackson's also back there in the secondary. What about the rest of them? Because quite frankly, outside of Horn, I'm not so sure a lot of people really know the other fellas.
Yeah, DiCaprio Bootle, one of the best names in the NFL. Nobody knows about. Yeah, DiCaprio Bootle, Lamar Jackson, the cornerback Lamar Jackson. There's a bunch of guys back there that are unknown, unproven type of commodities, and I don't know if that's a cornerback room that you can carry into the regular season. That's one spot where I think Dan Morgan's really going to pay a lot of attention to with the waiver wire and with some cuts that happen at the end of preseason play. So you're going to have to add somebody. Stephon Gilmore's been a guy that they kind of looked at. Don't know if that's going to happen or not, but if even if it's not Stephon Gilmore, you still have to add somebody to that mix. Dane Jackson, he's a quality player in his role, but I don't know that you can ask him to be your number 2 corner.
Mm-hmm. Usually when you get a team that needs to come back from the depths of where the Panthers were last season, one of the things you really don't even think about, but becomes a big X factor is special teams.
Yeah.
From a quick thumbnail perspective, do you think special teams can be a strength of theirs?
Yeah, I really do. Raheem Blackshear was one of the top kick returners in the league last year. Now that's kind of thrown to the wayside with the new kickoff rule.
We
We
don't
have
know.
no idea who's going to be good and who's going to be bad. And I asked Dave Canales that last week about the kind of the whole structure of it. Could there be different types of returners now because you have the closeness of the kickoff team? And he said, yeah, it's going to be maybe some more bigger bodies back there than you've not seen before. Maybe it's a Rashad Penny. Who knows? But as far as the specialists go, Eddie Pinheiro, one of the top 3 kickers in the league in terms of percentage over the last 2 years. You have Johnny Hecker, was the NFL's decade of the
Yep.
or winner of the decade. You have J.J. Jansen, the long snapper, who's been there for a long, long time, longest active Panthers. So yeah, I think they're in a really strong spot in terms of special teams. Sam Franklin, also one of the best gunners in all of football that probably no one talks about. Johnny Hecker actually compared him to Matthew Slater. So that's how
Wow.
highly they think of him.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, now I got to ask you about Brian Burns because the Giants bring him in here with that big trade during the offseason, and they give him a big contract extension, which obviously is something that he was looking for in Carolina and did not get. The Giants think there's a lot more upside there and that he's only just reaching his prime now. Where do you
Yeah.
think his upside is? And what did you see in him last year that kind of allowed him to rise above the fray of a team that only won 2 games?
Yeah, I think that the biggest kind of misconception with Brian last year, you look at the sack totals. I think he had 8 sacks last year, 8.5 sacks, and it may have been a slight dip in production. But you got to think, I mean, the Panthers were playing from behind every single week. So opposing teams were running the football in the third and fourth quarters. Those pass rushing opportunities just weren't there for him. And I think at the beginning of the season, you kind of wonder, is he trying to make sure that he's, protecting himself as those contract talks were going on? You never know. Brian is always a guy that's been a team first player. He showed up for training camp when a lot of guys may have held out. He showed up in spring ball last year when a lot of guys may not have shown up. So he's a team first guy. And I think the other thing too with him is he's a much, much better run defender than he's given credit for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. But that happens with a lot of pass rushers.
Yeah.
There are some guys who are just one-dimensional, flat out. They don't apologize for it, and they just want to sell out to get to the quarterback. There are these other guys who people just don't want to give credit to because they just think they're all that one-dimensional guy.
Yeah, yeah, he's an all around type of player, and I think the Giants fans are really going to love him and how he goes 100% every single play. He's a leader. He's a vocal guy. He's going to talk trash. He's going to fit right in up there with Kayvon Thibodeau. That's going to be a fierce pass rushing duo over the next few years.
All right, final thought. What about this trip to Germany? Now, we didn't know
Mhm.
until later on after the schedules, finally got announced. We knew the Panthers were going to be going to Germany early. We didn't know if the Giants were going to be that opponent. There was a lot of speculation around New York about it. Is there any sense of the dynamic of how this European game is going to go from a Carolina perspective?
It's really kind of interesting because we don't know what to expect, and because this is the first time a lot of these guys are going to be
Right.
making this trip. Dave Canales has done this trip before. He's even said he's kind of got a little bit of a secret that he's taken from his past experiences to know how to go about it. But I think really it's not so much about the game or the week leading up going there; it's the week coming back. How do you respond after that long trip over, that long trip back? That's really the biggest thing I think for a lot of the Panther fans are looking forward to, and I'm sure Giants fans are curious about as well. But as far as those games go, it's always hard to tell. You don't know what you're getting into. Is it going to be a low scoring game? It seems like that's kind of been the trend, but it's hard to really tell.
All right, great stuff from Schuyler Callihan of SI Now. We appreciate your time, but most importantly, we wish you all the best of luck again with your family situation. That's going to be a fun
Yeah,
weekend for you. I don't even know if you're going to be able
absolutely.
to watch the game.
I know. I'm going to be watching it in the hospital probably. So,
Oh no, don't do
thank you so
that
much.
because she's gonna beat the living heck out of you if you do that. I promise you.
Probably, probably.
Skylar, thanks so much for your time again. And folks, thanks for listening to today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live. It's part of the Giants podcast platforms everywhere and giants.com/podcasts. I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time, everybody.